Good morning, everyone. So, we're just a follow-up today for the research papers that we have been working on. We gave you the assessment that kind of looked at the basic elements in researching and research papers, and the area that the majority of you guys focused on or struggled with, excuse me, were lied in developing a topic. So, what we're going to do is take some time to just talk about the process of developing a topic. We're going to revisit the information that we saw in our surveys that we took, the trail survey, and just kind of re-solidify the process in developing a topic for our research papers. Again, if you always, if you have any questions, please stop me. If I'm talking too fast, please stop me so that we can be sure you have everything that you need. Okay? All right, so let's dive right in. Developing a topic, information to consider before writing. Well, today we're going to look at our information pool. So we're going to learn how to swim in our information pool. Then we're going to look at examples and we're going to make our observations together. This is just our overview, how we're going to look at it for this particular point. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Diving right in. So this is our information pool graphic. Notice how we have three sections: the deep end, the middle end, and the shallow end. And our deep end is going to represent a broad topic or our initial topic that we're looking at. When I say broad topic, it can cover almost anything and everything. It's very vast, very broad. If you dive into the deep end of a swimming pool, usually it's about 9 to 10 feet, sometimes 13 feet, very deep. You can drown in a lot of information. So I also equate this to using Google. When you do a Google search on a generic topic, you get several million results back in a very short amount of time. That's a very, very vast amount of information, a very vast, broad topic and breadth of information. So now we need to understand and learn how to narrow that information down so that we can make it more manageable. So when we look at our deep end, we look at our broad topic where we dive right in. It's the deepest part of our information because the topic is so broad, but we want to work our way to the shallow end, which is our goal. The second in here is you'll see is our middle end, our more narrow topic, our transition areas I listed. So if we go back towards the deep end, we tend to get more broad. But if we go towards the shallow end, we become more narrow or narrower, which is how we can, survive in our pool here. So the transition area is more so the middle end. Is that area where it's still deep, but it's not as deep, one, and two, is working its way towards the shallow end. And finally, we look at the shallow end, which is what we're calling a good topic, something that we can write on. We have narrowed it down so we're not as broad as we were, and we're more narrow, more specific, so that gives us something to write about. So we're not just writing about the internet as a whole, but we're writing about a specific element on the internet, which makes it more manageable. Because if you talk about the internet as a whole, you're talking about a vast, vast spectrum of things. Whereas if you're talking about websites, still broad, but much more narrow than just the internet in itself. So this is our information, our research information pool, where we're transitioning from the deep end to the shallow end. And we're narrowing our topic as we go towards the shallow end. So we get to one, a good topic, and two, something that's much more manageable as we conduct our research. So keeping our pool in mind, I put it at the top here. Now we're looking at some examples from the Trails assessment that we took that are going to show us good examples of a transition for a research topic going from broad to narrow. Now, if you remember the assessment at all, the answer that was considered correct I left off of here because the question was, which one is not a good example of broad to narrow? So when we look at the first example, it goes ecosystem, desert, sand dune. If you guys haven't already done your biomes project, your biome is an ecosystem. and there's multiple biomes around the earth. So when we look at ecosystem, that's a large, broad area. It can cover anything. If there's at least 7 biomes, just throwing it out there, you have 7 massive areas that you can talk about as opposed to one or another. Then in our transition area, we look at the word desert. So we're looking at an ecosystem, which is our broadest term, and we're going to be more narrow by looking at a desert in our transition term area. Okay, so a desert is an ecosystem. It's one of their biomes, it's an ecosystem. So now instead of looking at all of our ecosystems, we're looking at one, the desert. And from there, our most narrow term or our good topic is a sand dune. So while we can look at desert biomes, which is a large topic still, it's not as broad as the ecosystem, but it's not as narrow as our sand dunes. So we find ourselves transitioning into what is a more shallow topic or a good topic that's not as deep. It has a lot of information still. However, it's not the entire spectrum. Same thing we look at our second example for oceanography. The cause of tsunamis is our transition term, and earthquakes is our good topic or a shallow term. So the oceanography is a huge term. We have multiple oceans on this earth. There are different elements to study with the ocean. We can really pick any and everything. And so now we're looking at our cause of tsunamis, which is, another broader term, but it deals with oceanography. And finally, we're looking at our earthquakes. The last one is binge drinking, which you shouldn't be doing anyways. And then we're looking at binge drinking at college and the effect of alcohol on alcohol laws on binge drinking. So these are just examples of how we go from more broad to more narrow. So let's take a moment now to look at our observations. What do we observe? The deep end is the broadest term. The deep end is the first step in its immersion into the topic. So ecosystem, oceanography, binge drinking, broad topics, and have a lot of other information that goes underneath it, but these are very broad immersion topics, stuff to get you started and thinking about what direction you might want to go. So our deep end is when you're initially introduced to this, and the question to keep in mind, can a topic be more specific? If so, then we move to the middle end. In our middle end is our transition area. What do we observe? It's a less broad term, usually room for more specificity. The term are more specific than in deep end. They're one step down. They're a little bit more specific. The terms are they serve as a transition from the broader to the narrower. So yes, we could be looking at ecosystems, but now we're looking at deserts, which is a particular type of an ecosystem. The topics in the middle end can be used for research, but often they're still very broad and leave room to further narrow a topic. And this is true. You can take a research paper on deserts, or you can go specific and look at sand dunes. And if there's room to be more specific, then let's move to the shallow end. What do we observe in the shallow end? The shallow end is usually the most specific and narrowest term. Now, that's if we've gotten to our goal, our end goal, we're looking at sand dunes and earthquakes and the effects of alcohol laws on binge drinking. We're looking at a specific element of a broader topic, which is good for doing research because now we're looking at one piece of it and not the entire spectrum. These terms are much more manageable, and this is where the specific research can begin. So you can look at an ecosystem, you can look at a desert, but now we're looking at sand dunes. So now we have a term, something we can work with, something we can stand up in our shallow end of the pool and maintain. Now that research process can begin. Now the terms in the shallow end, you can still find a lot of information on sand dunes and earthquakes. There is a chance of drowning in the shallow end, even if it's 3 feet deep. However, those chances aren't as likely because you are now focusing your topic on something that's more specific and you have a better guideline. If you need to go a different direction, you can always do that. But at least in the shallow end, you are more likely to succeed in your research. All right, guys? Great.